All right. I think it worked. Hello, YouTube.
Hello.
Hey, Ben, how are you?
I'm well. I'm well.
Good.
I'm
Good.
mentally scatterbrained today. So everyone, please forgive me ahead of time. I've had a stressful week with not enough sleep and then too much sleep. And then you could probably see I've got I guess my my name thing there is covering, but I've got a bunch of stuff on my desk that's just cluttering the place again.
Right. Yeah, before the show, Ben and I were talking about chemical resonances and stuff from last week's show. Wasn't that a great host? We had Kelly Heaton on, not a host, but a guest. Kelly Heaton on to look at some of her art.
Artist. Yeah. What a great artist doing actual PCB artwork.
Yes.
You think your traces and lines to connect parts are artwork? Well, yeah, we all think of that. We all.
Yeah.
We call it that. Right. But
well,
she really is doing like amazing birds. And if you didn't see it, go back and watch.
Go back and watch. Yeah.
And this is also why you should subscribe to Bill's channel. This is on Bill's channel on YouTube. Subscribe and hit the bell.
We don't push the channel enough, but yeah, we should.
We never do. Like, there's a lot more going on here than, you know, and at the current weight, we do keep growing, Bill, but it's kind of slow. But,
well, we have two audiences. I think we've got people. You know, when it's a Commodore thing, that seems to be one thing, and then then there's everybody that's with us today, where we talk about electronics and more hardcore electronics. Yeah.
Well, today's everything. It's both, because I was just frustrated because I'm trying to do retro computing stuff, but it's not all Commodore. It's not all, for me, a lot of it's. I could say retro microcontrollers. I've got a thing. I don't know why. There's something about embedded systems as well from back when it was, the first and second generation microcontrollers.
Right.
And we've had those episodes too, where I have my audio gear from the 80s, like the Roland SDE 2500 that I'm working on not actively. I haven't done anything with it since that episode. But reverse engineering, I shouldn't say that. Probably there's some legal landmines there, but figuring out how to add to the firmware, let's call it that.
Right.
Because the SDE 2500 had MIDI input. It used a microcontroller from NEC 7810 because it has a serial port and analog to digital converters. So for the mid-80s, that was a really powerful chip.
Right.
But there were no good tool chains for it. There's no small devices C compiler support for it or anything like that.
Right.
So it's working with retro computing software to disassemble and then reassemble after adding some code. There's definitely plenty of memory space. They even used an EPROM on the board that was double the size it needed to be, probably just because it was cheaper.
Probably a 64. Yeah.
It's a 2764, but they only use 4 out of the 8K.
Right.
And even the 4K, looking at the code, they didn't fill it up very much.
My memory is the 32K. We bought a bunch of them because they came out before the 64K, but the price dropped on the 64K more than the 32K.
Yeah, probably there was a die shrink. There would have been a die shrink. Die shrink means you just get more for less anyway. So move on. And but I have the SDE 3000, which does not have MIDI input. And the reason is they used the first generation microcontroller ever, which was the MCS 48 family. Intel came out with it in the mid-70s.
Yes. Yeah, I have a data book for it. Yeah.
Yep, right around 1976.
Black data
I think they were working on it. I think 76 to 78, a lot of chips were made, and a lot of it changed the game. That was, as far as I know. Jump in the chat and tell me if I'm wrong, if you know more. I think, but I think the first ever actual official microcontroller was that family. the 8048 and derivatives. And I used to service telephone typewriters at the one of the first jobs I had in my career. I was an electronics technician for a company that imported and serviced hearing assistive devices and electronics for the hearing impaired and deaf community in Australia. And so they had TTYs, telephone typewriters. That's where Linux gets the /dev/TTY from. That's where it comes from, meaning
Right,
the keyboard, the input. And all these devices used 80C. By the current generation I was servicing then, even were already using modernized versions of that first generation microcontroller 80C49 with an EPROM next to it on the board, so they could do firmware updates. And but those microcontroller families didn't have serial ports. No serial ports. They had one feature for debug, and that was an SS pin. And that one pin on that 40-pin package would let you halt the microcontroller. It was a fully static.
Oh, you single-stepped it?
So you could single-step it.
Yeah.
And hook a logic analyzer onto the whole thing and analyze every single signal and single-step it. And that's how you debugged, just using a logic analyzer and single-stepping.
Right.
Man.
So I found the second book of the series that doesn't have the 48 in it, but this is what the Intel books look like back in the time you're talking. Right. And this does have like the 186 in it and the 8080, the /85.
I have the Philips microcontrollers, which became NXP, which then acquired Freescale.
Right.
And is now called Nexperia. They had a lot of microcontrollers derived from that first generation. They have the 8048 instruction set, and they were used a lot in infrared remote controls for TVs and that sort of thing. Tons of appliances, microwaves. They were used everywhere in appliances because you didn't need a serial port. You needed basic parallel port and just a little bit of memory and enough to scan a keypad and a vacuum fluorescent display, and that's about it. And then some basic controls, some inputs and outputs.
Right.
And I found you can still buy new old stock parts, at least the CMOS, like 2 or 3 die generations later, but still the same instruction set, same like drop-in compatible, but CMOS versions made by NEC in Japan and others.
Right.
You can get them from, all sorts of third-party suppliers like UT Source, the same company I bought my UPD 7810 chips from, have a bunch of 8048s and things like that, and they even have refurbished and new old stock EPROM window versions of the 87s, and they're not too expensive. So my wish was to play with some of those and do some of that. But that meant that even with my Roland SDE 3000, I might be able to do some mods to that one. Add a daughter board where the 8048 sits with an 8748, but attach an extra peripheral. If there's any way I can address or memory map in one more peripheral, which probably could do.
Right.
I could put a 16550 UART next to it.
Right.
Or probably not them, because I don't like the fully buffered UARTs for embedded systems.
Oh my God, I remember how hard it was.
They're not that useful for MIDI because you have to
the latency.
You're actually adding latency, and it's a pain.
Right.
Maybe I'll see if I can find an 882C51 to go with it.
Right.
And just have a basic UART next to it, and then I can add a MIDI port, and then add MIDI capability to the 3000. Or the other option was I can mod the 2500 that has MIDI already, but doesn't have as much memory, so the delay time is only limited to maximum 750 milliseconds at half bandwidth.
Right.
At full bandwidth, it's 375 milliseconds, but I can easily add more memory to it using 4164 chips.
Right.
And modify it with a daughter board to put the delay controller and extra memory chips.
Would they be new old stock, or would they be new stock 4164s? Do they still make those 64K by
no
one?
one's making them that I'm aware of. All the ones I've got a bunch of them, but the ones I've got all need testing because they're all pulls from old stuff. You know, you go to AliExpress or even Jamieco. Jamieco has been known to sell used parts. Maybe they're a more reputable supplier because they're here in the States and they test. Maybe they make sure things are tested. UT Source, I think I've had a good experience with them so far with the 7810s. And I think if anyone's going to have refurbished parts that are going to be taken care of because they store and ship them properly, they use moisture-free packaging and they do all the right stuff. So I think, and they use anti-static bags and everything. So I think I've got good confidence. I don't mind paying a little more for the parts and getting them from somewhere like that. And then use my Arduino 4164 tester and go through and mark, you know, some of them are going to be bad. We just accept it, right?
Oh, Micron brand DRAMs, we have a real failure vector in those things in the Commodore products, where you get a old Commodore 8-bit and have to replace every single DRAM. And the Microns, they've all given up the ghost, and it's something to do with the process from back then. It just wasn't. Who had 20 years experience? 20 years experience with them lasting 40 years. It didn't exist back then.
Right. So the other option is to, again, just the original purpose was to use a CPLD and recreate the Roland digital delay chip. And then I don't have to use old DRAMs. I could use a static RAM or a modern SD-RAM chip, and it's going to be reliable and all new parts. So that's the other project, but I haven't had time to pursue that at all. Since there's contract work and other things going on that I'm doing. So it's all kind of on the back burner.
You mentioned handling.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say all of this requires finding and being able to use old tools. And a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about some of this, and you'd showed your
software, the Palasm.
Palasm, and was it the Vantis back when it was a separate? There was a company, I think, called Vantis that got acquired by or spun out of AMD and then became part of Lattice. So the early PLDs that were erasable made by AMD are also Lattice parts, but we were talking about all that. And you have an AMD Mark development kit that's still in its shrink wrap, and you were going to send it over to Brendan. Brendan, shout out to you again if you're here today. Oh, there you are.
There he is.
There you go.
Brendan, it's packaged up. It hasn't shipped yet, but it's packaged up. I found a box and everything. Which is
so Brendan's setting the record straight. AMD Logic became Vantis, and that got acquired by Lattice.
I did not know that.
And so they developed the Mark, that sort of first generation of complex PLDs, CPLDs that were really powerful, was the AMD Mark family. And Brendan, you were saying you have to maintain mining and high rel equipment that uses those. And so you can't, like anyone would say, oh, why not just design a new board with a microcontroller to replace the old one? Well, eventually that has to happen, but then you have tens of thousands of dollars worth of, like you might spend 1 week designing a new board and writing some new firmware. And that will cost an engineer, right, for a week, $5,000, $8,000, I don't know, whatever it costs with some overhead. Okay, but then you have to spend $30,000 getting the thing tested and certified for its target environment and for safety and for reliability. That's a big deal. So in some industries, you have to keep the old stuff working. You just have to do what you can to keep it working.
All right.
Mining, military, there's a lot of scenarios where this is really important. And so, but then we're screwed, because every time you decide to design a new product, you're working with your vendors, you have to choose the chips, you have to choose the tool chain to develop for the chips, right?
Right.
Especially programmable logic. They're all wonderful devices and super useful for a lot of different things, right? But here I have, this is funny, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for even having this. I rescued this from a dumpster at Altium back in Sydney years ago. This is revision 1.2 of the Altium Nano board.
Okay.
This is one revision before the one that finally went to production. I have an even older rev. This is a prototype, a beta. This is rev 1 of the board design. And there's something, if anyone's ever had a nano board, you'll recognize something different about this. The daughter board is different, and this PCB is smaller. And what this uses as the main microcontroller, if I can get my flipping camera to focus on this. Hey, focus.
It's almost focusing.
There it is.
There it goes. This
is the main firmware runs on this CPLD. It's a Xilinx XC. It's the ones Johan's using. XC95144XL. It's 5 volt. It can run at 3.3 or 5, but it's a 5 volt as well. These are still, you can still buy these, and a lot of systems use them because they can work up to 5 volts. And sometimes that's what you need.
Right. 5 volt tolerant.
Right.
Now, what was the number on that?
XC95XL family.
Oh, okay. Because I went to look for my mock board. I couldn't find my mock board, but I found an old Xilinx board. So I got a cabinet full of this kind of stuff. And that's a great segue into today, is how do you support this stuff?
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. So the daughter boards on these, this was what had to change. They had these early connectors, these plastic high density connectors for the daughter boards. The point about these things was that it was modular development. So you could try different target FPGA devices. You could try Lattice, Actel, Xilinx, and Altera, based on whatever daughter card you put on. And then you had this standard set of peripherals you could work with. But these are the main one that it shipped with was Spartan 2E.
Right. This is a Spartan. Yeah.
Xilinx stopped supporting Spartan and Spartan 2 families many versions ago.
Well, they had a problem with
software.
They had a problem with the chip too, didn't they? Or was that the Spartan 1? They had the layout all wrong of the pins on the BGA version.
I don't know about that. The Spartan 2 family was solid, from what I know. And the Cyclone, Altera Cyclone, same thing. Altera. And so they get around that. Altera is pretty good, and Xilinx is pretty good at letting you still download the old versions of their tool chains. The problem is you start running into problems with the host. So it becomes difficult as time goes on, more and more difficult. And again, this comes back to, well, when is something just old and stupid and you should throw it in the trash? Or when is it now retro and cool? Well, maybe it doesn't matter how old it is. Maybe, like Brendan, you've got to support a product, and your product needs firmware updates to maybe you discovered a security flaw, or you discovered a flaw, a very small corner case where something could become dangerous for an operator. So you need to make an update, and you know what to do to update it. Maybe it's not difficult for you as the person maintaining the product, but you discover you can't do any changes because you can't get the software you had back then, or you right. It's really a problem. And anyone in this community who's also into retro computing, and you're trying to get something working from 20, 30 years ago, that's also a problem. The internet is a marvelous thing. Like, Google helps us find all this stuff, and there's a lot of people into things who share what they have on web pages and blogs, and there's a lot you can do, but there's still a lot that's really obscure and hard to find or impossible because it's just not there. And so we have this problem as engineers and designers of, no matter what you do, you're almost with anything but analog electronics or just discrete digital, with almost anything that requires an instruction set or some kind of programming, you're automatically getting painted into a corner at that point, even if it doesn't seem like it, because you just don't know in the future if you'll even be able to get the supporting tools, the software to program it and the hardware to program it. And this is the problem I have. So I've always used VMs. I like using VMs to keep some of this stuff going. I'm going to have a DOS VM, which is, sometimes you need this also for opening old hardware designs. I have designs I did in Protel for DOS many decades ago. And I could import them into Altium Designer, but it doesn't do the greatest job every time. It might make sense to run Protel Auto Tracks, which Altium made as freeware. You can download it from their legacy downloads page, and you can run it in a DOS virtual machine. It'll run on DOSBox too.
Wow.
And you want to, someone wrote a Visa video driver for it, because there's still some diehard PCB designers in Australia who still use DOS and Protel for DOS, Protel Auto Tracks, to design all their boards. It's crazy. Like, you wouldn't believe it in this day and age, but these people exist. I've met some of them. So, but it's like, if you're maintaining older things can be a real problem. So anyway, waxing lyrical again.
Yeah. Well, it's maintaining old engineers can be problematic too. It's like, especially me. I got body parts falling off.
Bill. We're getting high maintenance as we age.
We are, and it just goes
plastic.
Something about Boltzmann's constant is messing with me here. It's hey, before we get started though, shout out seeing Jeffrey Brace in the comment section. I do want to say VCF, Vintage Computer Festival, which there's VCF, the Federation, but the festival is next week, April 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. Wall, New Jersey. Definitely stop by if you're in the area. Also, another plug for Coriolis-effect.com. You can find our past shows that Ben was talking about, as well as a Discord invite, and join us on our Discord. So what you got here?
Well, this is my 4K, so the text is probably too small, and I don't know if there's a better way to show just a portion of it. Maybe I can share.
I can read that. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I don't have slides.
Open hardware monitor. So I can read the data, GPU, memory free, all that.
Yeah, I like open hardware monitor because I like to monitor the temperature of some parts, but I know it's not perfect for my NVIDIA Tesla K80. I think it accurately measures the temperature on startup. Oh no, it is updating. It is updating. Yeah. So VM VirtualBox is my VM host of choice because it's free, and I've had a lot of success with it in the past. But I've found since version 6, it's got some nice things that they've done to it, but it's also become, even the virtual host has become difficult to work with some old operating systems. And I had this problem on my laptop, so there was no warning of this. I was working with some open source software that likes to run in Ubuntu. It's called Meep, and it's a Python-driven finite difference time domain simulation solver for electromagnetics. It's open source, comes from MIT, really powerful software. And I was using that to generate some visualizations for my RF and microwave class that I do at Apex and PCB West. So just promoting that, if any of you get a chance to get to PCB West, it's worth going. It's in October, I think.
Will you be there this year? Do you know?
Hopefully. I've submitted my abstracts for my class again, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. But so I was running Meep, but all the tutorials to get started with Meep were saying, well, if you're running on Windows, then install Windows System Subsystem for Linux, WSL. And then you install Ubuntu. And then you can use the package manager in Ubuntu in Windows. And it all works. It installs real easy. And I had a great time. Installed ImageMagick, was doing my visualizations, doing simulations. And then I got all that done. And then a few months later, I went to open an Oracle VirtualBox to launch a CentOS instance I'd created years before, which I was using for running some financial accounting software, running a database backend for it. And it wouldn't start. And I kept getting these cryptic error messages from VirtualBox. Well, it turns out that if you enable WSL on Windows, VirtualBox, even the latest version, has a problem with that, because WSL hogs the hypervisor platform in Windows at that point. And it's, from what I can tell, it becomes incompatible with any other virtual machine hosting software. So I tried disabling it all. I tried uninstalling it. Nothing would work. It got completely hosed. So fortunately, I have another workstation, which is what I'm on today, right now. And I did a complete new install on that recently. So it's all fresh and VirtualBox is working. But I've learned my lesson. Don't install WSL if you're going to use any other virtualization platform.
And what is WSL?
Windows Subsystem for Linux.
Oh, okay.
It was the Microsoft attempt at showing that they're cool and hip and can get with the program with open source.
Right.
Although, I thought they did a pretty good job of that just with Visual Studio in general. Visual Studio is, have to say, is probably the best professional development platform there is for any kind of development out there. And it will compile to any target. So you can use it for, and like, this is not sponsored or anything. I'm just giving you my honest opinion. I am a capitalist, but I'm also about making things open enough that anyone who's got some talent and some good ideas can actually get started and do something and lift themselves up by the bootstraps. I love that. And for a long time, the only way to do that was with open source. And that's cool. And it's the open source community that makes all this retro computing possible. So I really value it. At the same time, I value having professional grade tools if you're a commercial entity and you've got the money to pay for it, where you get a really good user experience and at the same time can still do open source with it if you want. And that's what I like about VS Code. So anyway, I'm just going on and on. Sorry.
Right. No,
I hope this is not boring for everyone today. So all of that to say, I need to be able to run old versions of old assemblers like TASM. And TASM will not run on any new version of Windows in the DOS prompt. It's completely incompatible. It's a strictly 16-bit DOS program. So I need a box for running DOS. I had some other old versions of CAD tools, again, just to be able to open and maybe export or re-export somehow old designs I'd worked on 20 years ago. And just talking with Brendan on the phone a couple of weeks ago, we had a call and a chat together. There's other things. So old versions of Protel used to come with a PLD thing that got cut off and superseded by the FPGA part,
right.
and then that got cut off. And so really old versions of Protel, like 98, 99, that run on older versions of Windows and don't run so well on the current crop. But they have a PLD add-on that works with PALASM and WinCouple. I don't need Protel for that. I can use a text editor, but the point is, there's old tools that people have, and they just you have to be able to get them to work if you're doing anything,
Right.
any maintenance or trying to get something working with an old microcontroller.
Right.
And hopefully the goal there is to get it working. Once you get something working, you go, okay, now we know we can do that. So how do we make this work with modern tool chains? How can we update? How can I add tables to, or a plugin to VS Code that'll be good for MCS 48 assembly language, So, but getting, Kevin saying maybe they can bring back Clippy. I hated that thing. Didn't we all? Didn't we all?
Right. So
Right. But the first step of supporting some old instruction set or old silicon in a modern environment is getting it to work again in the old environment. So that's the point, right? So how do we do that? So we need XP Pro, we need 98SC. Again, like Bill and I, you and I were talking, I have valid license keys for these because I used to have every year I subscribed to Microsoft TechNet and they would give us license keys for pretty much everything. So I have it all. But even getting it working in VMs can be a challenge.
I'll interrupt you real quick. That's a real good tip is, I use the action pack is how I get more than I'll need a set of Windows licenses. And I've got all these keys and everything going back 10 years at least for Windows. So there are ways to get a Windows development environment with Windows support, and you go to their website and search for Action Pack is one way. And you had the what? You had the Tech Connect?
They used to have this thing called Microsoft TechNet.
TechNet.
And developers and IT professionals. I was an MCSE. So I was doing systems admin, networking, all that kind of stuff for a while. And as a TechNet subscriber, you would get licenses to operating systems and other desktop applications. It was officially for testing, but you could also use it, and they were permanent licenses.
Right. And on the Action Pack, I got 10 clients, which are, as long as I keep my Action Pack up to date, they're valid licenses.
Yeah. So I was trying to get onto this last night, but I was behind on some other project work I had to do, so I didn't get a chance to do it yet. But the problem so I tried DOSBox. DOSBox is an emulator, and apparently it's pretty good. I ran into problems with it not running properly on Windows 10. So I preferred to use a full-on virtual machine, even for DOS. And there's a lot of DOSes out there. I was going to use FreeDOS on this one, but I hadn't quite gotten to getting the install ready.
Now, did you have to go into BIOS and set the virtualization technology on like we used to, or is that just defaulting to being on these days?
I
VDT or
think that
whatever it
depends
was.
on where you buy your, like who made the computer. But
Right.
this is I'm running on a Dell
And you would get a very
workstation.
specific
It's
error
all,
message
it
if
was
you didn't get it.
enabled. It was enabled by default. But yeah, you
Right.
check. Yeah. So I'm just trying to
So
think.
yeah, that at one time that was a real important part of the formula. Is I got a server and I went to do VMware, and it was just at the end where they didn't support VDT virtualization technology or whatever it stood, and it didn't support it on that last model, and so I couldn't do VMware on there. I used to use a lot of VMware Server, and I was going to say I run VMware Workstation Pro, and I'll show you that after you show us this one.
VMware is probably better in a number of ways than Oracle VirtualBox, but it
costs money.
Just cheap. It costs money, so that's all. I'm trying to think where I put this, because something I find it's really convenient when you get an ISO file,
right?
Like an image of an install DVD. That's super convenient. But with a lot of the DOSes you download, like even FreeDOS, I'd have to use the live CD to do that. Otherwise, there's a full USB, but it's an .img file, which is a pain in the butt because then you have to install other software for.
I just did that last week. I converted IMG to an ISO, and then found out that VMware would have used the program I was using would have used the image file, so I converted it for nothing.
Yeah, but VM VirtualBox does not use IMG files. It only uses virtual floppies. What are those? What's the VFDs? Virtual floppy disks.
Really big.
I tried the IMG and it didn't understand it. Let me try it again though, just to be. I just want to try it again for. Maybe I didn't do it right last night. I was tired and stressed out. So here we are. Operating systems, full USB, because it's better to get everything if possible. Yes, it doesn't recognize this version of a .img file. So that must only really work with VMware and some of the others. Okay, that's okay. I'll do a live CD, DVD, and just do it that way. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm currently looking to see what program I did. Oh, so I used a program called IMG to ISO, and it looks like it's from overseas and whatnot. I actually uninstalled it as soon as I was done.
Yeah, see, that's the thing with all that. You end up having to try things that you're just not sure if you can really trust.
I know. It's like, how bad do I want it? All right, can I run it in a virtual machine in case it's hot? In case it's got issues.
Yeah. Chris, you were mentioning Windows for workgroups and NT4. That's so hilarious. I've actually done this back in Windows 7 timeframe, and the first 64-bit. I had VirtualBox running with XP, but I also got it set up with DOS and Windows 3.11.
Right. Workgroup for Windows, yeah.
I just did it for fun one day. But I also was then running ancient versions of Protel. This is back when I was working at Altium. So Protel Auto Tracks for DOS and Protel 3. And my justification for going through that and taking a day just to get it all working was to open the old software up and get screenshots from the original operating system from a window inside VirtualBox. So I could get screenshots, and then from the screenshots, I was able to, I used that for the product Wikipedia pages, just so there were screenshots there that people could see what it looked like. So but this appears to be working, booting from the CD image. The only thing that's annoying is And it's hard for you all to see. That's so small.
Yeah. I can actually read it, and my eyes aren't so. My eyes are the
on full screen mode, but it still doesn't. It still doesn't scale.
Right.
Still doesn't scale. Let me get back out of full screen mode. Scaled mode. That's better.
I started an ISP in 1995, and Windows 3.1 did not have TCP/IP. Simply didn't. Had NetBIOS. And so we had to ship every Windows customer a Windows 3.1.1 Windows for Workgroup disk. And Microsoft allowed that. Usually they're verboten. You can't send diags. You can't send any Microsoft branded software. But back then they recognized the advantage of getting 3.1.1 in people's hands. And we even had, I was one of the first 50 ISPs to adopt Internet Explorer. And they allowed me to brand Internet Explorer. So when you opened Internet Explorer, the web browser, not the other Internet Explorer, it had our logo in the top right corner. So it was like a really cool time to be an ISP. That was back when Netscape wanted $20,000 for me to distribute Netscape web browser, because there was no web browser you could give people.
Didn't like that. Did not like that. I did something wrong there. Let me try this again. Yes, continue with the installation. Yes, erase and format C.
Press a key.
Okay, I don't know why it didn't do this before. It made it reboot, but full installation with application and games. Of course I want games. Half the reason for running a DOS box is so I can run Duke Nukem.
Solitaire.
And Xenon. Who played Xenon?
Trumpet Windsock. Now there's a bunch of memories.
Oh my gosh, Trumpet Windsock. It was so painful getting on the internet back then.
Oh, it was. So somebody put out a program that shimmed TCP/IP. They made the MTU real small, like 60 bytes. And they're like, this will speed you up. And you had to tear out TCP/IP and reinstall it to get rid of it. They hard shimmed it. And it didn't do anything except make the test work better.
Right. But it actually would have caused problems for a lot of other
all kinds. Yeah, it'd frag the hell out of your packets. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those who don't, like Bill, you do networking full time other than what we do on Fridays.
Right.
For those who don't know, explain what's the MTU.
MTU is the maximum packet size for Ethernet.
Right.
Not to be confused with MSS, which is the maximum payload size inside a packet.
But it's a minimum transfer unit or media transfer unit. Maximum transfer unit.
Yeah, I'll look it up here. But the typically it's 1500. Yeah. And but there are some interesting things, because voice and video packets actually are much smaller. They'd love to be a bunch of Volkswagen Beetles shooting down the highway as opposed to big old loaded up semi-trailers like FTP packets are, where they're just trying to
real time signals.
You right. So less latency to transmit a small packet because it goes brr, whereas the latency of a big packet is okay, now the packet's there. So yeah, so there's times when MTUs being small are good. And then I could go on about VPNs and all that kind of thing, which make packets smaller and bigger and whatnot. But yeah.
Okay, well, here it is. I can load
media transmission unit, maybe.
With some drivers. Let's do it with expanded memory. I always forget what's the difference between extended and expanded. Extended was, I think, the one that came first, and it just meant that some space that was previously unaddressable above the 640K threshold,
right,
from 640K to 1 meg, that little slot was then enabled through a software driver. So that was extended. And then there were third-party cards that had tons of memory chips on them that were ridiculously expensive, and they'd plug into your ISA slot, and they would page swap
Right.
in that
And that's
extended
expanded.
space. And
Yeah.
so like you got tons of memory, but it slowed everything way down.
Right.
Way down.
I remember running a mentor program back then. I used to do my development on Mentor.
Yeah.
There was a name
Brendan's
for it.
correcting me. EMS came first.
Yeah, and that was part of being
Expanded
an
memory.
engineer, was getting all of your expanded and extended memory working on your machine so that you could then use the CAD software.
So all of this stuff was loaded at boot time with your config sys, but I'm not, maybe FreeDOS doesn't do it the same.
Oh, that's right. You had to put all those variables in the...
This looks empty, but FreeDOS must have some advanced capability that makes it easier, because I've got a mouse working in FreeDOS, and I see config sys has nothing in it. Or maybe I'm just not.
Look, is there multiple config sys's? Probably not.
I might have to adjust attributes here. I can't remember all my DOS commands. It's been too long. Attrib.
I used to use an interpreter called FreeDOS.
Oh, maybe it's FreeDOS config.sys in this one. Okay, let's try this. Edit fdconfig.sys. Yeah, there it is. It is in a config sys. Okay, I got it. Oh, so they've got the menu default going. They've got code page selection here with country, buffers, files, menu color. The mouse wheel doesn't work, but maybe page down does. Yeah, so the syntax here is somewhat different than it used to be for IBM PC DOS or Microsoft DOS, but so it's loading a bunch of things high.
Yeah, that's right. We used to choose where to load high and
upper memory blocks. That was that chunk I was thinking of, I think.
Right.
Above the 640K. FD auto. So that must be the auto exec bat. Let's have a look at what's in there. FD auto.bat. Well, getting used to the sensitivity of the mouse in a text mode again. How about this? This is cool. So I've got to see if some of the old compilers for the 78K family and the 8048, I think they should work just fine in FreeDOS. So this is where I'm going to try and set everything up for those old tool chains. And then, of course, the issue is sharing files between them, because I don't want to use this tiny window in a text editor, this old text editor for writing code. So I need to find the right way to interoperate between them. At least with Windows XP and later versions, you can have drag and drop between desktops and shared folders and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
8086.
That's it. Johan, as long as it's not OS2 config sys. Yeah, I never did run OS2, even though one of my first computers was my first two desktop computers that I actually owned personally, that weren't my father's or borrowed from a friend, were PS2 clones. The first one was a 286 PS2 clone made by Memorex Telex. It had a 40 megabyte SCSI drive that had stiction, and some days when it was cold, I had to open the lid of the case, flip the power on, and whack the top of the hard disk drive with my fist to get it to start up.
Wow.
And then I would leave it running for days because I didn't want it to stop again. So that was really scary and very annoying. And then the second one, which I picked up at an old auction house, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, was another Memorex Telex, but it was a 386, and I kept that one aside for myself because it had a 387 coprocessor, and it had extra cards in some of the microchannel slots. That one of them had tons of extra memory, and another one had special IOs and some other stuff. It had obviously been a government CAD workstation. The problem was it had lost its CMOS battery, and so it had lost its configuration. And with PS2s were the first, what we call true plug and play, in that you had no jumpers to set. Everything was held in CMOS.
Right.
And the only way it worked was you had to have the installation program from the hardware manufacturer to set the CMOS settings correctly. And I didn't have it for any of the cards that were in it. And so basically they were bricked, and I was really pissed. So, but anyway, it worked enough that I could run Windows. I ran Windows 3.1 and had the 32-bit extensions, and ran my 8051 development tool chain from Philips on it, and I got through college on that machine.
I have a brick, but hang on a second. Let me see if I can solo this. It's a different kind of brick.
Oh, that's a cool brick.
Just happen to think of that when you...
Brick wall filters.
Yeah.
Yeah, the brick wall filters are interesting because they're that classic trade-off between a really sharp cutoff or phase linearity, because you can't win both.
Right. Which I always remembered. Then you chose the kind of filter, for example, a Bessel filter had better. It had a less roll off, but better less phase distortion with it. So there, for people way smarter than me, there were tools, ways you used to deal with those. Wait, now I want to open this up.
Yeah,
I will.
Can you show us what's in there?
Yeah, it's going to be discrete coils and things, I imagine.
I wonder what's even in this thing. Kiosk.
So here, let me show you my VM for a second. I've got mine set up, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I've done is I had to go back to Windows 7 for an analog devices. Actually, I have a shot of it on, whoops. What the heck did that? I have a, my XSplit wants me to go to the store now and buy stuff. Hang on.
Like we're seeing your screen. I can.
Yeah,
see,
there we go. So this is something I've got on the bench. I did a Hackaday video with this, and I wanted to. It's actually a Sigma Delta or Delta Sigma AD converter. Lots of bits, XLR input on it, and I wanted to get it running again.
Looks like a nice DSP development board.
It is, except for they wanted Windows 3.1. So to get the software to work, which I actually didn't get it to work, but I wanted to show one thing. So this is Windows. This is VMware
7. That looks like Windows 7.
Yes, it is, and this is running under VM Workstation Pro. And normally you have to buy these in packs of about 50. Hang on, let me see if I can get us. But you can. I got mine off of Amazon, where people are selling them for like $12 each, the license, and it's a true VMware license. So I bought my Workstation Pros for like $10 each. So I did spend money for it. But the thing to tell, the reason for this whole thing to exist is if I go to VM, removable devices, and there I actually see my analog devices showed up. So this was the whole thing behind getting my VM to work, was making sure that I told it that take the USB port off the host and assign it to the virtual machine.
Yeah. So that's the best thing we can hope for now. Like, and VirtualBox lets you do the same thing. You can assign, you can assign a dedicated host USB port, and you have to do this. So you're dealing with old tool chains. You probably also have your USB J-Link, or in my case, I use universal, like FTDI based USB to JTAG and serial, the classic USB JTAG port that we all use now. But you need to be able to do your debug and everything in the VM. So at least we've got that. I was just complaining that for whatever reasons, and it's probably just because the development team who maintains a lot of these virtual machine hosts looks at modern hardware. The idea is you're running something on modern hardware.
Right.
And their primary use case is probably cloud computing and high performance computing in a virtualized environment. So there's isolation for security. And so you have access to high computing power and you can serve a lot of websites on one machine. All of that, right? Those are the reasons they really developed this. They're not thinking about hardware engineers who are developing embedded systems who need to be able to run, USB JTAG debug. But at least we have the USB capability. The problem I have is I actually have dedicated parallel ports in my machines wherever possible. I had a PCI Express card that has an actual parallel port controller on it. Why? Because some of the legacy stuff I'm dealing with needs a parallel port that you can bit bang.
Right.
And as far as I can tell, I can give a serial port I can give USB to a virtual machine. I can give a serial port to a virtual machine, but I can't give a parallel port, which drives me mad because it kind of defeats the purpose of having it. I wonder if VMware or what you're using there, Bill, can allow you to assign a parallel port if you have a parallel port.
It's supposed to, there's a thing called the hardware abstraction layer, and you have to defeat it to talk bit bang to the port. Otherwise, you're talking to software that says, I'll take care of the port for you, but I don't know anything about bit banging, unfortunately.
Yeah. So this to me also means there's still in some cases, particularly the maintenance case, like what Brendan's dealing with, that there's still a case for having actual for real old hardware sometimes.
Right.
If you really need to maintain. And I remember several years ago going to the Open Hardware Summit. I've been to a few of those now. I hope to go again someday in the future. But one of the Open Hardware Summits was essentially hosted by Osh Park, and it was up in Portland, Oregon. It was in a really cool old theater. It was amazing show. And then there was a happy hour at Osh Park headquarters that night. And so Lane and Drew and team, I hope you guys are watching us. And if you are, quick shout out. Love you guys. Thank you for what you do for our community. But they had a mini show in their headquarters with some people doing different things and showing off. They had some tables set up with people's different things. And one of them was a 286 PC. Someone had actually used Osh Park and rebuilt their whole 286 AT motherboard with AT slots and everything. And the whole thing was running. And I got to play Xenon again for the first time in 20 years. The last time I played Xenon was on my Memorex Telex PS2 clone.
Wow.
So, yeah. Electron Ash. It is Friday evening, my friend. It's beer o'clock somewhere in the world. I believe you're in the UK, so you're a few hours ahead of us. So well done, sir. Hats off to you. And it's time to unwind. Time to unwind for sure. And I'm looking forward to beer o'clock myself. Xenon 2, one of my favorite games of all time. One of the best. I used to nightly play Xenon 2 and Duke Nukem. And then when it became a thing, Wolfenstein 3D, which was really the first 3D game I'd ever played, other than Elite on the Commodore 64, which was all wireframe. Did anyone play Elite on the 64? Surely someone did. What you up to there, Bill? You've gone off into the background.
Yeah. I'm trying to get a signal to show up on my thing here on this, but it's acting better than it was. I now have these status lights here, but it was not working for me earlier, even though I could see the device in USB. But it's acting a little better than it was. So I've just been playing while you were talking, Bob, and listening to. I'm on a wireless mic now, so I can run around the lab and still talk to you. So
let's see if Hangman works on this. Oh, look at this! I've got Hangman going. Sound on, sound, language, English, play. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. Let's do animals. Choose a letter. A. Good. A's in there. R. Too easy. I made it. I didn't get hanged. Okay. What do I do next? I've got no idea. Some of these old games. Anyway, what I really want is Xenon 2. I'll have to download that somewhere and get that installed on this, but got to get all the sound working and everything.
cool.
Yes. Amstrad CPC was a great system. They had some really unique stuff going on in that, especially in the later times with some of the add-on cards. I was really impressed. They had a TI digital signal processor add-on card that had a 16-bit TI DSP chip, and it could do sound effects and all sorts of stuff, synthesis. That was a powerful machine for its time. But again, like all of the machines that came out for home computing in the mid to late 80s, the PC market just destroyed them all.
Yeah.
And the only ones that survived beyond that were Amiga and
the Atari Jaguar and the Amiga were tied. They were in a death struggle.
Well,
yeah.
It was ST in Australia where I grew up. My computer had an ST and the music department used it.
Right. It had built in a MIDI.
Yeah, that's why we had it. So
right.
It survived because it had that one thing that some studios wanted, was to use a computer for MIDI sequencing instead of dedicated hardware sequences that would cost way more and were a pain to use.
So back at Commodore, there was a hardware engineer assigned to what became the C128 when I first joined the team. And so we were co-engineers. And a month later, it was just my name in the box. He had kind of slid off to the side, and they put him in charge of the MIDI, Commodore MIDI, an expansion port cartridge. A year later, he was still working on the Commodore MIDI expansion port cartridge. And that kind of shows why he wasn't on the C128. He was moving at a non-consumer speed in his design cycle, unfortunately. So Commodore never, we had a MIDI and we had a network, we had a token ring cartridge that never saw the light of day either.
Oh, token ring networks.
Yes.
Remember those.
You had to charge them up. You needed a something to charge your MAU. It was called MAU. It was a MAU charger. Had a 9-volt battery in it, and you had to activate the first relay in the MAU.
Those token ring cards were big in Digital Equipment Corporation. Sold a lot of those to the Australian government and to educational institutions. So I worked for DEC in Australia for a short time as a support consultant, and those were the network cards that they all had the big 15-pin connector, 15-pin D, and the other end of it was a big, thick, heavy, expensive cable, and the other end had a vampire tap that would bite into the coax that was the ring throughout the company back,
right?
Kind of like this one ring of coax that was terminated at each end, and it. No, I'm thinking of Ethernet. Actually, Ethernet did that.
Ethernet had the coax. It had a 75 ohm termination resist. I still have some somewhere around.
But they had token ring. They did have token ring, but
they had those square plugs. Yeah,
they were crazy expensive. It's no wonder.
Here's the brick wall filter. Look at this,
Look at all
Ben.
that. Look at all that. All those inductors.
Yeah. So that's like a big long pi filter, I figure.
There must be so much group delay in that thing. It's unbelievable.
Now I feel the urge to throw this on my
You should measure it. I'd be curious to see the delay. Measure the group delay on that.
So topic for next week, maybe.
Well, next week you're going to be at VCF, right?
Next week I'll be at VCF. Yeah.
So there's a chance. So there's a chance there'll be some streaming from there, but it's probably unlikely, to be honest. Maybe you could capture some video, do some quick editing, and do a recap.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. There's enough people there that I should be able to relax a little bit and maybe pull out a phone or something and try and use this here new technology. See if I can do me some streaming.
I believe there is a StreamYard app. In fact, I know there is because I installed it.
Yeah.
In case I ever need to stream from my phone.
For the 2 o'clock time frame, we may catch Dave Haney and Andy Finkel. And this is assuming BCF's let me stream. Maybe I can. We'll see. But there is a class at that time that's interesting with our friend Dave.
Yeah, that would be cool. So that would be very cool.
All right. Anything else to show us here today?
I know. Sorry, slightly boring show today. I feel. Don't hold it against us. Do come back. I don't.
That's fine.
There's so much on my mind right now. I'm struggling. But there's a lot going on, a lot of projects, and a lot. I was talking to my son and trying to get him to agree to help us design some logos and things, because I feel like we've reached a mass where, and I'd like to ask the community about this. I mean, Brendan, thank you again so much. Brendan sent us some money to help pay for the Discord and pay for StreamYard, and it's a massive help. And so we now have StreamYard to make it easier for us to stream
and have guests on.
And we can have guests, and so we have the software we need now. It's all working, and it's been paid for a few months. So thank you so much, Brendan. But it got me to thinking. You know, we're this community now, and it might be cool to have some hats or T-shirts or something, and just see if people agree, or if you would like that to be part of our community, like that it would help us, and it would be really nice.
Look at this one, Ben.
Yeah.
Phase equalized. It says under 75, phase equalized. Look at this one. It's got a big black, what is that, a delay line?
It looks like something potted there. It could be a delay line, probably, yeah. Is it potted?
It's hard. It looks like a big square potting. Yes.
Yeah. So that's their secret sauce. But so you had those because that was for some Hackaday videos you were doing. Is that what?
No, these I've just had for 25, 30 years, from back in the days when video frame grabbers were brand new. There were spurious frequencies. Your frame grab looked a lot better with a brick wall filter in front of it. So that's why I had these. These are actually from commercial broadcast. I got this from a broadcast engineer.
Right. So to clean up video signals was
yes, get rid of the aliasing artifacts. Yes.
Right. Yes, makes perfect sense.
Yep. So, and they would have used them for time-based correctors. This is back when RAM was so expensive that you could only buffer 1 to 2 4 rows, horizontal rows of NTSC. And what they did was they would do that in order to, if one transmission rate was slightly different than the other, they would correct it within 4 horizontal lines. And so it had to keep running on the fly. Whereas nowadays, we just throw it in a buffer and then read it out of the buffer at a different rate.
That's some really, really cool engineering that went into that stuff back then.
To making it appear to work, yeah.
And even before that, they were using analog bucket brigades. to delay and phase match, and you'll find in a lot of
the
old
noise
VCRs,
was just
bucket brigades are horrible, and it's a shame because I have a friend who's actually a famous guitarist. I don't want to name drop or anything, but he's a good friend of mine. But he's known for everything being analog, and so I want to design pedals and stuff for him because he's my friend. And I'm worried if I suggest we do a digital delay, he'll be like, no. Dude, bucket brigades are worse.
Well, you could insert some noise.
The exact same principle, but they're noisy as heck.
You could insert some noise if you want to simulate an analog delay line.
Yeah, but we don't want the noise though. Like if anyone could get rid of noise, they like to get rid of it. A little bit of hum from an amp, that's different. Like it's
subliminal. Yeah.
That's a thing. We don't mind that, but hiss, like broadband noise from a bucket brigade is nasty. No one likes it. Even analog people don't like it.
Right. It's got its own swooshing noise and everything else built in it too.
So my suggestion was going to be, well, why don't we do a lo-fi digital, make it like an 80s, but not lacking bass. Because the one thing I hated about 80s music, the one thing that I hated about the 80s was the songwriting was fantastic. The mastering sucked because everything was mastered for vinyl. Yeah. Now, please don't crucify me. I'm not saying I don't like vinyl. I do. The sound of vinyl, it does have something nice about it. And the sound of tubes. I like tube amps. Like that sound. There are certain types of music that are wonderful to hear on it. The problem is the bass. When you're mastering for vinyl,
yes, you can't break through the wall.
The bass. Yes. You want to know. Like there's all these videos all over YouTube, right? All these. I'm on a hobby horse now. Oh, you got me going. There's videos all over YouTube harassing Metallica for their 1988 album "And Justice for All," which was released first and foremost on CD, but it was mastered by someone who was mastering for vinyl compatibility. And people give Metallica a hard time for "And Justice for All" because you can't hear the bass the whole album through.
Ever since
the most bass is coming from the guitars, not the bass player. And sometimes they're doing it to tease Jason Newsted, or they're doing it to tease the band because Jason Newsted was brand new to the band for that album because their prior bass player, who was a phenomenal, had died in a bad road accident during the tour. So there's all sorts of speculation around why you can't hear the bass. I'll tell you why. Because it was 1988. You couldn't hear the bass on anything in 1988 unless you went to the live show and heard the bass live.
Right.
So anyway,
I have something to show you.
Off my high horse there. But all I'm saying is, some of that analog stuff is great, but bring back the bass, and digital lets you do that.
Check this out.
Yeah. You had to limit the bass because you didn't want the needle to get out of the groove. Look at that. That's cool. And if you mastered it with too much bass, you would make the needle jump.
Yeah, it would actually break through the wall. So they had to do companding on it. So that Applied Science has that up. Ben over at Applied Science did that with
that's cool.
A tunneling microscope and everything.
That's really, really cool. That's one of the greatest microscope. It's not a microscope.
Yeah.
It's almost.
Yeah, he did that with an electron microscope.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he built his own, I think. Or built out of pieces.
That guy's awesome. He etched boards on ceramic using a laser cutter, which I thought was just a really difficult way to make something really difficult. But it was cool. It was cool to watch the video.
He recreated the display on the Apollo guidance computer, the Disky. Yeah, he did that using the actual materials. So
he's the guy who was also doing his transcranial magnetic stimulation experiment.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
And he inspired me. I thought I could make my own device and then deal with anxiety and depression at home.
Or create
And
something in your brain that you have no way to reverse.
And not have to take drugs. But
yeah.
But then I saw the price of those SCRs you need, and I'm like, yeah, and I'm not going to do that.
Well, we'll have to talk about SCRs next sometime.
Yeah,
because I started on SCRs before there were triacs commercially available. We had to use SCRs, you know, and a triac is basically bidirectional silicon controlled rectifiers.
Yep.
But yeah, so I was really big into designing light dimmers when I was in high school because I ended up doing lights for a rock group. And what made me different was I also was designing, or not designing, but using EMI filters so that my lights could be, didn't bring their own audio artifact.
Yeah, that would make the whole system buzz.
Hum and buzz. Yeah.
I don't miss that. You know, that's one good thing about modern lighting's all LED. So
yeah, they gotten better. So
yeah, the horrible buzz when the dimmer is at 50% is a thing of the past. And also crazy power consumption. I used to do lights too. I remember
in Rush, everything.
The PA system for outdoor gigs I used to do on Australia Day with my brother-in-law. We would produce the concert for the local city, would put on a massive fair, and we would run sound and lights for the main stage. They'd have bands coming through. It was so much fun. And at the end, they'd finish with fireworks. It was cool. We had a 200 kilowatt generator that we'd rent.
Okay.
10 kilowatts of it was for the whole PA and everything on stage. The rest was lighting.
Yeah.
It's like if you want a cool light show at night and people want to dance and everything, we're gonna need 150 kilowatts plus some headroom. It was crazy. I don't miss that. I don't miss that at all. I'm glad we're LED now and we're so much more efficient. And the blues are really blue from LED.
Oh, wow. I was going to show you some of my lights that I have here, and my very expensive camera looks like it's broken its viewfinder. So yay, something else to work on.
Sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that.
All right. Well, let's call it a day here, unless we got more to chat about.
No. I got stuff I got to get onto. I got a lot of paperwork for the government.
I have a camera I have to fix. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us today. How many people were with us today? I'm curious. I
30.
Look, 30. That's not bad for live for a more relaxed, chilled day with no special guests. But come back. We're gonna have more and more special guests into the future as well. We seem to find that we've got a groove with finding good people who are interesting to talk about. So and some of you might like to jump on at some point and show us what you've been working on. So come back, spread the word, hit subscribe.
Go to Coriolis-effect.com. Join us on Discord. Amazing conversations going on in Discord.
Yep, and Discord's been rattling all day, but I haven't looked at it. So
well, the good thing is people answer each other. It's not like Ben and I have to jump in there I'll jump in and find out somebody.
We're here to provide this. That's right. We're here to provide this community for all of us. You know, that's what we want to do. So
excellent. All right, so next week we probably won't see you, but if we do, it'll be something from VCF, unless Ben feels like firing up a camera on his own. And otherwise, we'll catch everybody in 2 weeks from now.
Right on.
All right, everybody take care. Bye.